Hello everyone! Pag-uusapan natin ang standard equation ng hyperbola with center at the origin at kung paano natin siya may igagraph. But first, let us be familiar sa itsura ng ating hyperbola. Kung mapansin natin, on our Cartesian plane, we have this black curve, yung nandito tsaka nasa kabila. Hyperbola always comes in pairs, dalawa talaga siya palagi. And then kung napapansin natin, yung iba't ibang broken line natin, yung green tsaka yung yellow, kailangan natin sila para mas ma-plot natin more accurately yung ating hyperbola. Babalikan natin tong graph natin, but first let us go with our standard equation. Meron tayong dalawa. We have x squared over a squared minus y squared over b squared is equal to 1 kapag ang transverse axis natin ay horizontal. Kapag sinabi natin na transverse axis, siya yung yellow line na nandito, na nasa x-axis natin, and then yung transverse axis, dumadaan siya dito sa ating center, na nasa gitna, nasa origin. Tapos dito sa dalawang points, kung saan nagbabago yung direction ng ating hyperbola, sila yung ating vertices. So this is our vertex 1 at ito yung ating vertex 2. Tapos dumadaan din siya dun sa dalawang fixed points ng ating hyperbola na nandito. Etong dalawang fixed points na to ay matatagpuan natin kung saan bumubuka yung ating hyperbola. At tinatawag natin yung points na to as our focus. So this is our focus 1, f sub 1, and then this is our focus 2, f sub 2. Kaya dito natin makikita yung ating transverse axis. This is horizontal or pahiga. Kapag ang transverse axis natin ay vertical, etong nasa baba natin yung ating pangalawang standard equation, yung hyperbola natin will be opening upwards and downwards. Tapos ang pinagkaiba lang nila dun sa ating equation ng horizontal transverse axis is that mauuna yung y squared over a squared. Nagpalit lang ng position yung ating y squared tsaka x squared compared sa ating horizontal transverse axis. Kaya ang titignan natin para malaman natin yung orientation ng ating hyperbola ay yung unang fraction natin sa ating standard equation, either x squared over a squared or y squared over a squared. Tapos titignan natin yung numerator. If x squared, then our transverse axis is horizontal, yung hyperbola natin is opening to the right or to the left. Pero kung y squared naman yung nandito, then ang ating hyperbola ay merong vertical transverse axis, siya ay bumubukas upwards or downwards. Ngayon na familiar na tayo sa ating standard equation, kapag ang hyperbola natin ay merong center sa origin, then we can focus on our points. Kung mapansin natin, this is a horizontal transverse axis yung nasa Cartesian plane natin. As we observe our standard equation, meron tayong a squared tsaka b squared. Ano yung gamit ng a at b na to? Yung a na nandito, that is the distance between our center and our vertex. So this here, yung ating nasa Cartesian plane, yung a, siya yung pag-itan ni center at ni vertex 1. In the same way, center at nung ating vertex 2. Yun yung gamit ng ating A. And then for our next variable, meron naman tayong B, yung nandito, nasa baba ni y squared. That is the distance between our center and our covertex. Asa ng covertex? Nandito siya sa taas ng ating center. So this is B sub 1, this is B sub 2. Sila yung ating covertex. Ang kailangan lang nating tandaan, yung pag-itan ni center at ni covertex is just equal to B. Same, dito sa ating taas, saka dito sa ating baba, ang distance natin ay B. Ngayong alam na natin yung pag-itan ng ating center at vertex na A, tapos yung center at covertex natin na B, let us discuss another line na palaging perpendicular dito sa ating transverse axis. Kung ang transverse axis natin ay horizontal at dumadaan siya sa center, then we have another axis naman na dumadaan sa ating covertex at sa ating center. Ang orientation naman niya is vertical. Ang tawag natin dito, this is our conjugate axis. Palagi siyang perpendicular sa ating transverse axis. This is another line na kailangan tayo maging familiar when it comes to hyperbola. Nakuha na natin yung distansya between our center and vertex, center and our covertex. For our third point, kunin naman natin yung distansya between our center at yung ating focus. Ang distansya sa pag-itan ng ating center at focus is this variable c. Papunta kay focus 1, pareho din siya dito sa ating focus 2. Makukuha natin yung c na to by applying this formula, itong nasa baba. So we have our c is equal to a squared plus b squared. Then kunin natin yung square root niya. Kaya naman siyang isolve kasi meron tayong value ng ating a sa ating standard equation. Meron din tayong value ng ating b na nandito. I-apply lang natin yung formula para makuha natin yung c. Then makukuha na natin yung distansya between our center and our focus. Then lastly, from our reference point na ating focus 1 at focus 2, kung ang transverse axis natin ay horizontal, pahiga, yung distansya between our focus na nandito, tsaka yung points na nandito sa nasa taas ay vertical. Perpendicular palagi sila dito, and then that concept applies dito rin sa ating focus 2. Perpendicular din yung distance dito sa dalawang points na to. At matatawag natin yung points na to na mula sa ating focus as our latus rectum. So we have our LR1 here, tapos LR2 sa baba, tapos LR3 dito sa taas, and then LR4 dito sa baba. By the way, you can interchange yung subscripts. Pwede nating ilagay dito sa LR1 or sa LR2 as long as tama yung concepts natin at yung plotting natin ng points. Then with that, yung distansya between our LR and our focus, this is always equal to yung nandito sa baba, yung ating b squared over a. Meron na naman tayong value ng b, kunin lang natin yung square niya and then di-divide natin siya dun sa ating a, then makukuha natin yung distansya between our LR and focus. In the same way, ganun din yung pag-ita ng ating focus 1 at LR2, b squared over a din. Same here sa ating LR3 at focus 2 and LR4 and focus 2. This is it for the points ng ating hyperbola. Sila yung kailangan natin para mag-graph natin siya. Now, let us proceed dun sa line na unique sa ating hyperbola when it comes sa ating conic sections. And that is yung dotted line na yellow na nandito, tsaka nandito sa ating kabila. They are our asymptotes. When we say asymptotes, etong line na to, palapit ng palapit yung ating curve, pero they will not meet. So, the distance is approaching 0, pero they will not intersect. May drawing lang natin yung asymptotes by looking at our vertex and co-vertex. Magdodrawing lang tayo ng vertical at horizontal line mula sa ating vertex at co-vertex. Kaya nakabuo tayo nitong kulay green na rectangle na nandito. And once nabuo mo na yung rectangle, kunin lang natin yung edges nandito sa ating apat na corners ng ating rectangle. And then dadaan tayo sa center. Idodrawing mo na lang yung ating asymptote na dumadaan dun sa points natin at sa ating center. Same here dito sa ating kabila. So that is how we draw our asymptotes ng ating hyperbola. Then kapag kumpleto na yung points na i-drawing na natin yung asymptote, then pwede na nating i-trace yung ating graph ng hyperbola. Sila yung ating preliminary concepts when it comes to plotting our hyperbola given the standard equation. Now gamitin natin sila sa ating example. Let us have our first example. We have to plot the graph of the hyperbola with the equation x squared over 16 minus y squared over 9 is equal to 1. For our first step, alamin muna natin yung orientation ng ating hyperbola. Ang titignan natin ay yung ating unang fraction ng ating equation. We have x squared over 16. Dahil x squared yung ating numerator, then our hyperbola is opening towards the positive x and negative x axis or towards the right and towards the left. Kaya meron tayong horizontal na transverse axis. Sinulat natin kanina ang standard equation ng hyperbola with a horizontal transverse axis ay x squared over a squared minus y squared over b squared is equal to 1. Again, ito yung equation natin kapag yung center ng ating hyperbola ay nasa origin. Kaya ang transverse axis natin, let me write down here, is horizontal or pahiga. With that said, kailangan natin kunin yung values ng ating A tsaka nung B para maiplot natin yung ating graph. Pero as we observe dun sa ating given equation, ang meron tayo ay 16 tsaka yung 9 natin. Kailangan natin magkaroon ng ating exponent na 2. Kaya para magawa yon, let us get the square roots of our denominator. Kaya ito ay magiging x squared over, ang square root ng 16 is just 4 and then squared. 4 squared is just equal to 16. Ngayon, meron na tayong exponent na 2 na pareho dun sa ating standard equation. In the same way, dun naman sa ating y squared, we have y squared over, yung denominator natin is 9, the square root of 9 is just 3, kaya this will become 3 squared. Wala pa rin naman tayong ginawa sa ating right side, so this is still 1. Ngayon, meron na tayong value ng ating a na 4, tsaka yung b natin which is equal to 3. Kaya sulat natin siya dito sa baba, we have our a that is equal to 4, tapos b is equal to 3. Ito yung kailangan natin para mag-graph natin yung ating hyperbola. With this, nasa standard equation na tayo, alam natin yung orientation, we can start plotting. Ang transverse axis natin ay horizontal, tapos manggagaling tayo sa ating origin, kasi ang center ng ating hyperbola with this equation again ay nasa origin, kaya dito tayo sa ating center. Then let us draw our transverse axis. Horizontal siya, tapos dumadaan sa ating center. So we have our transverse axis at our x-axis. Ngayong nakuha na natin siya, let us start with our vertex. Ang vertex natin, ang reference point, ang pagmumulan natin ay yung ating center. Kaya sulat natin sa baba, we have our center at 0, 0. So this is C at 0, 0. Then ang vertex natin ay dumadaan sa ating transverse axis. Ibig sabihin, ang galaw natin ay towards the positive x-axis at negative x-axis. Kaya ang dadagdagan at babawasan natin ay yung x-coordinate ng ating reference point which is our center. Tapos ano yung idadagdag at ibabawas natin? As we have discussed earlier, the distance ng ating center at vertex ay yung value ng ating a, in this case si 4. Kaya ang mangyayari, our vertex is just equal to, sa reference point natin sa center, magdadagdag at magbabawas tayo ng ating a which is just equal to 4. Tapos wala tayong movement towards our y-coordinate, kaya siya lang yan. Then we solve for the values ng ating vertices. Magsimula muna ako sa negative para nasa kaliwa yung ating vertex 1. So we have our v1, this is equal to 0 minus 4. This is negative 4. Tapos 0 pa rin yung ating y-coordinate, and then v2, doon naman tayo sa ating addition. We have 0 plus 4, kaya this is at 4 and then 0. Now we have our vertices. Ang vertex 1 natin ay negative 4, 0. Andito tayo. Ito yung ating v1. Tapos ang v2 natin ay nasa positive 4, 0. At this point, ito ang ating v2. With this, ang susunod na point na kukunin natin ay yung ating covertices. Ang covertex natin ay nasa conjugate axis na palaging perpendicular sa ating transverse axis. Dahil pahiga, yung ating transverse axis, tapos dumadaan siya sa center, then ang ating conjugate axis naman is vertical, tapos dumadaan din siya dito sa ating center. We have our conjugate axis na nandito. And then yung covertex natin ay makikita natin dito sa ating conjugate axis. Ang movement naman natin from the center is towards the positive y-axis and towards the negative y-axis. Ay ang gagawin natin, magdadagdag at magbabawas tayo dun sa y-coordinate ng ating center. Dito naman tayo. Tapos the distance between our center at yung ating covertex is equal to b, which is 3. Kaya siya yung idadagdag at ibabawas natin dun sa y-coordinate ng ating center. Kaya kapag ginawa natin yun, to get our covertex b, so we have, wala tayo sa ating x-coordinate, 0. And then from our y-coordinate, 0, dadagdagan at babawasan natin siya ng ating b, which is equal to 3. Kaya ilalagay natin si 3 dito, and then close. Para yung b sa buwan natin ay nasa taas, mag-uumpisa naman ako sa addition. Again, you can interchange yung subscripts. Kaya we start at 0, and then we add yung ating 3. 0 plus 3, this is just equal to 3. And then for our covertex 2, b sub 2, magsusubtract naman tayo. So we have 0 minus 3, that is just equal to negative 3. Kaya andito tayo sa 0 and then negative 3. Then kapag nilagay natin siya dito sa ating graph, ang b sub 1 natin ay nasa 0, 3. So we are at this point. Ito yung ating covertex 1. Tapos at 0, negative 3, andito naman yung ating covertex 2. Nakakuha na tayo ng 4 na points. For our next one, ang kukunin naman natin ay yung ating focus na F. Ang ating focus ay makikita natin sa ating transverse axis. So, ang movement natin ay towards our positive x-axis and negative x-axis. Tapos, ang reference point pa rin natin ay yung center. Pero ang hindi pa natin alam ay yung distansya sa pagitan ng center at ng ating focus. Kaya kailangan natin gawin yung ating formula. We have to solve for our distance C nung ating center at nung ating focus. The value of C is just equal to the square root of A squared plus B squared. Meron na tayong A tsaka yung B. Our A is 4, ang B natin is 3, kaya kaya natin siyang isolve. So this is just equal to the square root of A squared is 4 squared, B squared is 3 squared. Then as we continue on with our formula, this is equal to the square root of 4 squared is 16, and then 3 squared ay 9 lang. So we have the square root of 16 plus 9 is 25. Ang square root ng 25, this is just equal to 5. Sulat ko sa taas dito, our C is just equal to 5. This is the process by applying our formula kung paano natin makukuha yung ating C. Again, the distance between our center at yung ating focus. So let me erase this part para may mas malawak pa tayong space. Ngayon na meron na tayong C, as we go back again sa ating drawing, ang focus ay nasa transverse axis, kaya ang movement natin ay towards the positive x and negative x-axis. Our reference point is still our center. At yung na-compute natin na distance is 5. Kaya magdadagdag at magbabawas tayo dun sa x-coordinate niya. So that is why to solve for our focus F, we have our 0 x-coordinate, dadagdagan at babawasan natin siya nung ating C, which is 5, and then still wala tayong movement sa ating y-coordinate, 0 pa rin to. To get our focus 1, para consistent tayo na nasa left side, una ko nang gamitin yung ating subtraction. So we have 0 minus 5, that is negative 5, and then 0. Tapos ang focus to natin is, we use addition, 0 plus 5, that is just 5, and then 0. Then kapag nilagay natin to on our Cartesian plane here, ang focus 1 natin ay negative 5, 0. We are at this point. Ito yung ating focus 1. Tapos, ang ating focus 2 ay nasa 5, 0. Andito naman tayo sa point na to. This is our focus 2. Malapit na nating makumpleto yung ating points. Kailangan na lang natin ay yung 4 na latera recta. Ang distance ng latera recta is always perpendicular sa ating transverse axis. Kaya, vertical siya, yung orientation. And then, ang reference point naman natin ay yung ating focus. So, we have our movements at positive y and then negative y-axis, both kay focus 1 tsaka kay focus 2. So, eto yung ating movement. Kaya magdadagdag at magbabawas tayo dun sa y-coordinates ng ating focus. With that said, paano natin makukuha yung distance ng ating focus at LR? Gamitin lang natin yung ating formula, which is b squared over a. Eto yung pag-itan between our focus and the LR. This is equal to, kung babalikan natin yung ating given values, ang b natin, this is just equal to 3. Kaya ang b squared natin is just equal to 3 squared, and that is just equal to 9. Tapos, denominator natin is a. We have our a na 4. Kaya we have our 9 over 4. Or kung nasa decimal to, this is 2.25. Ngayon, meron na tayong value ng ating b squared over a na 2.25. Idadagdag at ibabawas na lang natin sila dun sa y-coordinate ng ating dalawang focus. Simula muna tayo sa ating focus 1. Ito muna yung i-consider natin. To get our first 2 LR, ang gagamitin ko lang na term or symbol is LR12. Ang movement ulit natin ay towards our y-axis, kaya dito tayo sa y-coordinate magdadagdag at magbabawas from our reference point na focus 1. So we have our focus 1, negative 5, and then 0. Tapos, we add and subtract yung ating b squared over a na 2.25. So, this is 2.25. Then, para naman makuha natin yung ating LR, 3 and 4, ang basis naman natin ay yung ating focus 2 na nandito. We add and subtract nung ating b squared over a sa y-coordinate niya. So, we have our LR 3 and 4 at 5, and then 0. We add and subtract our 2.25. Then, kailangan na lang natin siyang i-compute starting with our LR1 and LR2. Magsimula tayo sa taas. So, we use addition. We have our LR1 is just equal to negative 5, and then 0 plus 2.25, we have positive 2.25. And then for our LR2, manggagaling naman tayo pababa ng ating focus, kaya we use our subtraction. So same coordinates, we have negative 5, and then we subtract our 2.25. So this is negative 5 and then negative 2.25. This is our LR2. For our LR3, we use addition first. So we have our 5 and then 0 plus 2.25. So we have positive 2.25. And then for our LR4, then subtraction na tayo. We have our 5 and then 0 minus 2.25. This is negative 2.25. Ngayon na nakuha na natin yung apat na LR, i-plot na lang natin sila sa ating Cartesian plane. Let's start with LR1 and 2. Let us have these values, tapos ilagay natin siya dito. We have our LR1 at our negative 5, 2.25. Nandito tayo somehow sa point na to. This is our LR1. Tapos LR2 sa baba tayo, negative 5, and then negative 2.25 around this point. This is our LR2. Adjust ko lang yung ating LR1 para hindi tayo magka-problema sa graphing. So, andito si LR1. Tapos sa kabila, ang ating LR3 is positive 5 and then 2.25. We are somehow at this point. Ito ang ating LR3. Tapos LR4 at positive 5 and then negative 2.25 around this point. This is our LR4. Now, we were able to plot our points ng ating hyperbola. For our last step, kunin na lang natin yung ating asymptote. To get the asymptotes, kailangan natin mag-draw ng rectangle by connecting horizontal and vertical lines galing sa ating vertex at ating co-vertex. Vertical line sa ating vertex nandito, ating green dotted line. Gawa rin tayo dito sa kabila. And then, we have our horizontal line naman dito sa ating co-vertex 1. And then, baba tayo dito sa ating co-vertex 2. Tapos, markahan natin yung ating edges, yung apat na corners ng ating rectangle. And then, magdodrawing tayo ng ating line connecting yung ating edges at yung ating center. So, starting here, so broken line na lang para mas madali natin siyang masundan. Pababa dito sa ating corner na nandito. Tapos, magdrawing din tayo sa kabilang side. So, dito tayo, dadaan siya dito. Tapos, we have our center. And then, pababa dito sa ating susunod na point. And then, we have our asymptotes. Kailangan na lang natin i-drawing yung ating hyperbola touching our LR1, vertex, and LR2 na hindi tumatama sa asymptote. And then, same here, touching our vertex, LR3, and LR4 na hindi rin tatama sa ating asymptote. Now, we have the graph of our hyperbola. Medyo mabusisi lang yung proseso kasi from our center, kunin pa natin yung dalawang vertices, dalawang co-vertices, tapos yung dalawang foci, and then from there, kukunin natin yung ating apat na latera recta, tapos kukunin pa natin yung dalawang asymptotes, saka lang natin maigagraph yung ating hyperbola. But still, finally, we were able to graph our hyperbola with our equation of x squared over 4 squared minus y squared over 3 squared is equal to 1. We have the graph of our hyperbola with this standard equation.